Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us to study this week's portion. Before we begin the text, I want to give an introduction. I want to show an introduction. This week's name, the name of the portion is Noah. It's named after a person who was saved from the great flood in which God restarted the entire universe. What's so special about this story is that it actually happened in reality, but also it refers to a spiritual recent of every human being. So the story of the great flood, there was another flood, by the way, that the Torah does not even record it because there is no message for us. This is a significant message for each one of us. And therefore, every time when we come to study this week's Torah portion, there is something that it can teach us. One of the lessons is something that we're going to be discovering today. But we, as a whole, are an ark in a great ocean, and each one of us can be compared to Noah.
What's the other one?
In Dor Enosh. Enosh is, I believe, before Noah, that God brought a flood that wiped out almost all of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you don't find it in the text, it's in the Midrash.
Okay.
We're starting from selections of Likutei Sichos, the first talk on Noah, page 57. In Torah Or is a book of collections of Kabbalistic interpretation to the Torah portion by the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe explains that the flood was not merely a punishment, but also a process of purification. In other words, it wasn't bad, it was beneficial and good. Prior to the flood, the world had been sullied by strife, corruption, and violence, and the flood cleansed and purified it. Therefore, the waters of the flood inundated the earth for 40 days, corresponding to the 40 se'ah, that's measurements required for a mikveh. A mikveh purifies a person, garments. For this reason, the waters of the flood are referred to as the waters of Noah, for in Hebrew, the name Noah connotes tranquility and satisfaction. The Alter Rebbe in Torah, or the Rebbe gives us a summary of the points the Rabbi is making, is A, the reason the flood came is not just as a punishment, but also purification, to freshen up, to give it a better new coat of paint, so to say. That's why, how long the flood lasted? 40 days. What does number 40 connotes? It connotes the measurement required for a mikveh. A mikveh needs to have 40 se'ah. Se'ah is a measurement, a biblical measurement. So therefore, 40 days for the universe. That's why in the Haftarah of this Shabbat, we're going to read, as we have here the Haftarah reader, Kimei Noach Li. Yes, Bob, are you familiar with Kimei Noach Li in the Haftarah? Did you look in the Haftarah?
Yeah.
And doesn't say Kimei Noach Li?
Yeah.
It does say. Okay. Mei Noach Li. God calls the great flood as the water of Noach. Now, the simple interpretation is because we blame Noah for the flood. Had he been steadfast in his protest to God, perhaps God would have averted the flood. But the Kabbalistic interpretation is the word Noach is comfort or tranquility or easing off, and therefore Mei Noach, they are called water of comfort because they brought comfort to the universe. They brought tranquility. They brought the universe into a very comfortable state where everything is easy.
And that's why this Haftarah gets read.
And this week's
Likutei Sichos.
The same one?
Yeah, the same way, because it's a comforting Haftarah.
It's a comforting, one of the 7 comforting Haftarot. Thank you very much. Rani Vesimchi? No. Rani Akara Le'alada? Which one is this week's portion?
What's Rani?
Rani Vesimchi. Okay, so we repeat the Haftarah. That's the only time, I think.
Yeah, no,
We repeat the Haftarah twice in the year.
In the Ashkenaz, the Portion Noah is the combination of Kitetse and Rhea.
All right.
And Chabad, they just do.
Only Kitetse.
That's why he's doing.
There was a mention thing about Noach didn't argue with God about the Mabul.
What?
Noach did not argue with God about the Mabul.
Correct.
The other thing also is that Noach when he was told, build the Ark strong and bring a flood, it took him 120 years. And you didn't go out there and try to tell people to tshuva.
Right. But this is the simple interpretation. According to Kabbalah, they are called Noah's flood, Noah's water, because they brought comfort to the universe. They created a better universe. In the above source, the Alter Rebbe associates the water of the flood with the abundant waters, the worries and challenges a person faces in earning a livelihood. Ultimately, these abundant waters cleanse a person of his undesirable traits, enabling him to attain tranquility and contentment. And the Rabbi will go into explaining, but let me give you an introduction. The Alter Rebbe in Torah Or continue on to say that great flood or great water refers to our busyness in earning a livelihood. A person who is busy making a living, making ends meet, is a great, great challenge. And therefore, they are called great water. They wash him off. He comes home, he cannot concentrate. He cannot sit and study Torah. He cannot be doing what he was supposed to do by God when he was created. It's very challenging because he had to go to work and he has to do negotiations and he has to get up very early in the morning and he has to, sometimes he's not making ends meet, so he has to find ways to, so to say, make do with whatever. These are called great waters. The great water, says the Alter Rebbe, is also not only water of mikveh that purifies the universe, but it refers in our day-to-day life, all the challenges that we face, mental challenges that stops us from living a very, very tranquil, fruitful life. The parallel between the worries and challenges a person faces in earning his livelihood, the flood, and a mikveh can be explained. I'm sorry, because there is firing of missiles in the Holy Land. Okay, I try to do not disturb it. The parallel between the...
Where's it coming from?
It comes from, no, from Hamas. Okay, I close it. Let's continue. The parallel between the worries and challenges a person faces in earning his livelihood, the flood and mikveh, can be explained as follows. The inner purpose of immersion in a mikveh is for a person to engender bitul, nullification within himself. Thus, Rambam, right? Rambam describes how one should immerse himself in the waters of pure knowledge to enable the volume of a mikveh must be 40 sa. That is, a sufficient amount of water to encompass one's entire body. The Hebrew word tvilah, immersion, contains the same letters of the word bitul, nullification. Through immersion in a mikveh, a person cultivates an attitude of bitul that takes him beyond his self-concern, elevating him and transforming him into a medium of holiness. Let me finish reading and I'll explain that. This is also the true purpose why a person is destined from above to confront financial worries. Even though they may temporarily upset and confound him, causing him to be crestfallen, ultimately they will break his egocentricity and motivate him to step out of his self-concern. Through this process, he becomes a medium for holiness. The Rabbi is saying there is a connection between all three. Bitul is a word that has no translation in English. Bitul means self-nullification. I don't exist. Imagine the candle in this room, when it's dark, it gives a lot of light and benefits. What if you take it outside to the sunlight and you put the candle, you can hardly see the flame. It's called bitul. The candle has no value compared to the sun's illumination. So bitul is nullification. How do you say the word immersion in the mikveh? To immerse in a mikveh? Tvilah. Tvilah is the word habitul, just rearranging the letters. Tvilah means to immerse. So what happens when one immerses himself in water? He nullifies himself to the water, to the source of the creation. Water was placed on earth before anything was created. When someone immerses himself in a mikveh, they nullify themselves, and when they come out, they are a new person. Says the Rebbe, that's the idea of the water of Noah, that the universe needed to be immersed in water so that it can be nullified to God and recreated. Now it can explain so far about a little bit. It can explain. The Rebbe will explain it much deeper. The idea of the livelihood earning and other distractions that a human being faces mentally. What happens when a person is faced continuously with challenges? What happens is he nullifies himself. He realizes he's not so smart and he's not always that successful, and his decisions don't always bring success. So that lowers his ego, gets rid of his ego, and nullifies them to be connected to God and realize everything comes from God. Did it make sense? Does it make sense? So now we understand that all of three, the waters of Noah, brought comfort to the universe because it was an immersion in the water. It is compared to the mikveh because the idea of mikveh is to immerse and be nullified. And that compares in Kabbalah, the great waters that befall a person it refers to the worries of earning a livelihood and day-to-day challenges. They also breaks the ego of a human being, reminding him that he's not that great and he does not always make the right choices. Since the ultimate intent of the financial pressure a person experiences is not, heaven forbid, to punish him, but to wash away and cleanse him of undesirable traits, his personal process of purification need not be a lengthy one. It can be accomplished in a brief moment. Once a person grasps the inner divine intent in having been sent a particular challenge confronting him, the works to bring about the inner changes these challenges require him to undergo, this alone will suffice. He can then immediately proceed to attain a state of tranquility and contentment in both material and spiritual matters. Says the Rebbe, therefore, it doesn't require too long. You immerse yourself in a mikveh. As long as your entire body covers by water, you come out. You don't have to be there a minute or 10 seconds, not even a split of a second. As long as, why? Because the purpose is not, it's not the end of it's a means to an end. The goal is to remind a person that he is not so smart and the ego should be, so to say, abolished. And therefore, as soon as he achieves that and he acknowledges that everything is from God, Baruch Hashem, thank Hashem, with Hashem's help, then the challenges can go away immediately. Now the Rebbe continued, the raging waters of the flood originated in two sources, the awesome depths of the earth and the portals of heavens. If you read about the process of the rain from Noah, they came from two places. One, from the depth of the earth, they came up, and two, from the portals of the heavens, water came down. So there was water from the bottom and from the top. By the way, if you read about the end of the flood, you would see that it doesn't say that they stopped completely. The way that the water receded, it says that God is collected them into the earth. And Rashi brings in Talmud that those waters, there are some places where the water from the flood still exists, and these are hot springs. Because if you read in the text, the great flood of Noah was hot boiling water. That it says Vayimach. It melted the entire universe. It melted the universe. That's why when scientists say to you, it's so, this artifact is so old, etc., one of the points I make is just remember that there was a great flood. The great flood wasn't regular water, it was hot water. And therefore, objects have changed because you put them under boiling water condition for a little bit for 40 days, and you'll see a major distinction. You won't be able to, so to say, go back and say based on your assumption of the conditions today. But back to our discussion, the Gemara says there are places of hot springs today that they are the remnants of the great flood. In Tiberias, there is the hot springs. Anybody been there? the water is always hot there. It's like 170, close to 200 degrees. I took my kids about a couple of years ago, and we drove in Tiberias, and you can see the hot springs that you have to pay to get in, I think. But on the road, they have a little bit of water coming out from the springs just to let people. He stopped literally on the road. It's a two-lane road, but there was no shoulders. He stopped, he stood behind the car to direct traffic and system. He could take the kids and let them touch the water. Aside from the smoke, we went there in December. Aside the steam, we put the water, we almost got burned. These are the hot springs that until today, and there are hot springs all over the universe, right? In the United States, we have hot springs.
Yep.
Not mineral
Yeah,
springs.
here.
Mineral springs is different than hot springs.
Those are 83 degrees, my pool's lower than that.
You have hot
Hot
springs?
springs, interestingly enough.
Now,
You know, the water that comes out is so hot you couldn't do it. They mix regular water. When you go to the hot springs and everywhere, at Tiberias, you go to the pool, the water that's coming out is very hot. You
Right.
Mix it with regular water because you couldn't swim.
And
there.
still it's very hard.
Still, yeah.
But
still
you can manage, right?
Right. But the real hot, you wouldn't be able to touch it.
Right.
so God performed another miracle also, because the water was supposed to boil and melt everything out. But was it Og who held onto the ark from underneath? 40 days.
The ark, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, Malcolm.
Oh, Og.
Oh, yeah, I think so. For 40 days, he was able to survive.
And
That
what
was
did
that
he
was
do,
by the names.
where did Oak eat? Because it was more than 40 days, it was a whole year. before it was
Og,
to
it to me is not a question how, because I don't understand this human being. He was a huge giant that lived for how many years? He was at the time of Moshe, over 1,000 years.
Right.
So
Over 1,000? Really?
Yeah.
from Noah,
Yeah.
10
He's a
generation
child.
to Abraham,
Okay.
and
I
then
thought
from
I
Abraham,
thought they-
another 400 years.
Is he the oldest guy that ever lived? I thought 970 was like the old.
The Jewish drama.
Not except Og. I think that Og lived longer, but it's not mentioned in the Torah, his age.
Okay.
I just want to say, so therefore, I don't know that I can ask, how did he survive the great flood? I don't know. I have another question. It's not me. I heard the question. When Noah in this explosion is trying to find out if the earth is already dried out, right? He sends the raven don't want to go. He sends the dove comes back. Then he sends the dove again, and finally doesn't come back. I don't understand. Og was outside the ark, right? Right? He couldn't ask Og to tell him. He could tell Og, stick your hand in the ground and show me. If there is mud, you cannot go out. Why didn't he ask Og?
Why didn't he take a look out the window?
Huh?
Why didn't he take a look out
He
the window?
did, but he couldn't see because he was on top of the mountains of Mount Everest.
Oh, the thing.
He couldn't see if he can go down.
Not literally Everest.
Ararat.
Ararat is Mount Everest. Is the tallest mountain. No?
Everest is,
Different now.
All right. So the Torah tells us Mount Ararat.
Oh.
I just want to say that the answer that I heard is Baruch Rosenblum. Somebody gave him an answer. He says that when Moshe comes to killing Og later on, it says, God says to him, Al tira oto, do not fear killing Og. And one can ask, why does he fear? What fear? He killed Sichon. Og had a brother, he killed him. So why here is worried? Says the Rashi, based on the Talmud, that Og had a zchut. He had a good deed. What's a good deed? Vayavoy Apolit, a refugee, came and told Abraham that Lot was taken captive. So he did a mitzvah by saving Lot, by telling Abraham. So Moshe is worried 1,000 years later that this good deed, 500 years later, that one good deed that he had would not enable Moshe to kill him. So what if Noah would ask him a favor? Now we would have 2 mitzvot. For 2 mitzvot, for sure, nobody can touch him. And that's why I didn't ask him. But I just think it's an
But he killed him
interesting
anyway, But he
question.
did kill him.
Huh?
But he did kill him.
God commanded him to kill him because he was threatening the Jewish people. If you leave the Jewish people alone, there will be no trouble.
Well, where is this? Is this Midrash?
About what?
About,
Og.
Og not Moshe feared to kill Og.
yeah.
God says, Al tira oto, ki biyadcha natati oto. Do not fear Og because I put him in your hands. Rashi says, what do you mean don't fear him? God already commanded him to kill Og. In addition, he already killed a giant before. Rashi said, because Og had a good deed in his credit, and for that he feared that he will have no control over him.
But Rabbi, it really wasn't a good deed. Around the going get killed so you can have Sarah as a wife.
Right. So what's the lesson?
The lesson is that.
No good deed goes unpunished. There you go.
What's the lesson? The lesson is
Like Shmuel, at that point is what you have to give
the
the
lesson is you do not care about the intent. If someone had performed a good deed, he gets the full credit for it. Even though he had an ulterior motive, he wanted Abraham to be killed so he can marry Sarah. Yet the good deed that he had for allowing Abraham to save Lot is something that stood with him. Okay, let's continue. So now we're going back to the Great Flood. The Great Flood had two sources of water. One is from the depth of the earth came up, and the other one is from the loads of heavens. Here, I'm starting again, page 59. The raging waters of the flood originated in two sources. One, the awesome depths of the earth, and two, the portals of heaven. Similarly, the factors that confront a person with difficulties and challenges are also divided into these same two categories. A, the awesome depths of the earth, challenges of a material nature, for example, worries about his livelihood and the like, and B, portals of heaven, difficulties stemming from lofty spiritual concerns, for example, involvement in communal affairs and the like, which can present obstacles that impede one from studying the Torah and observing the mitzvot. Each one of us has different two categories of challenges. These are the great water that present challenge to survival. One is the worries of livelihood. How do I make ends meet? How is it possible that I study Torah if I work all day? By the time I come home, I'm knocked out. I can hardly eat dinner. So these are challenges that we all face. Medical issues, surrounding, bad neighbors, my children or my parents are giving me a hard time. This is one category, that's the depth of the earth. It comes from physical and material source. The other one is from heavenly portals. Someone who is committed to helping the community, involved in community affairs, to volunteer, to sit on a board of a group, to be there for others, and then nothing left for me. I have no time to study Torah. I'm not able to study Torah. True involvement in communal affairs is necessary, but such involvement should not be allowed to conflict with one's Torah study or the observance of mitzvot. For studying the Torah and performing its mitzvot enable a person to establish a bond with God. In other words, the rabbi says, no matter how busy you are and how holy your work is, you serve the community, you're there to in a kitchen soup, you helping children learn math, you do all kinds of work. It should not disturb you from the study and prayer that you must do for God. Through that bond, godly energy and vitality are drawn down to the person, as reflected in the verse, you who cling to God are all alive today. If, however, that connection is lacking and a person fails to carry out that which the Shulchan Aruch requires of him, of what value are all the praiseworthy activities in which he is involved? And that's why when I was young, the Rebbe was encouraging yeshiva boys to go out on their free time to encourage young Jewish people to put on tefillin. Somebody decided that perhaps they can do it on the account of studying. Instead of studying all day, take off an hour and go and do tefillin. The Rebbe was not happy with that because it should not, communal affairs or communal involvement is great and it's a big mitzvah. but it cannot come on the account of Torah study and commandments that God gave us. His rationalization that he is occupied with the portals of heaven, lofty spiritual pursuits, is erroneous. Such a rationalization does not originate in the godly soul, but rather in the animal soul. The clearest proof of this is that it poses a hindrance to the study of the Torah and observance of the mitzvot as prescribed by Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, this is a state of affairs that is not something holy, but the polar opposite. David says if it causes someone not to perform the mitzvot and not to study Torah, there are no connection to God to it. This is the portals of heaven of water that destroy the universe. Because we need to know, as they say, Tikkun Olam, begin at home first. You need to make sure your relationship and your connection to God is there. Once you have a solid connection, a solid establishment, then you spread out and you get in communal affair. So the other one, the depth of the earth that open up is worries about livelihood, is worried about medicine, medical issues. These are worries that are real. You can't ignore them, but you need to know it should not allow to disturb you. The ark should rest over those waters. But the heavenly portals, these are, assuming somebody might think that these get a waiver from performing the mitzvot and studying Torah. Says the Rebbe, that's quite the opposite. That's the portal of heaven that we have to make sure not to allow it to enter. Since his involvement does not stem from holiness, even though the matters themselves concern the portal of heaven, it will lead is progressively lower until the point that he finds that he has descended from the heights of the portals of heaven to the awesome depths of the earth. And he is steeped in base materialistic concerns. Says the Rebbe, it will lower the person to a materialistic base materialistic concern.
It's no good deed goes unpunished.
And
It's
no good
deed
deed goes unpunished. I just want to show you a story. The Rebbe, the previous Rebbe lived at the time. He became a Rebbe in 1870, I believe. 1870, his father died in April. And he assumed he was the only son. So there was, for sure, he was the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the father-in-law of the Rebbe. And he needed, and at the time he became the Rebbe, it was the most difficult, challenging time because the communists took over. And unfortunately, in the Communist Party, the Jewish people were the most fervent soldiers to push. And there was a section,
He must have been really young. When he became Rebbe.
He was 40? No, he was 40.
1870, you said?
Yeah,
He died in 1950, right?
No,
right. So
That's
it's not
80 years.
1870,
80
Tavish Bey. It
It's
was
later.
30 years,
Later.
1920. I'm
That's
sorry.
better.
Communists didn't come into the 20th century.
You're right.
1920?
1911,
1917.
1917. He became a Rebbe in 1920, 30 years before he passed away. Okay, 1920. I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting. So when he became a Rebbe, he needed he was a first fighter. He was well known all over the Jewish world as the one who stood against the Russians. He's the only one from all Jewish leaders. And I'm sure everybody heard that he took I shared with you, he took a minion of men secretly, and he made them swear that they will go in fire and water to save communities and establish Jewish schools and mikvahs and minyan, even at the cost of their life. Most of them did not make it. And that's why you did not hear that from me, huh? Okay. Leonard Rifkin, his uncle, Chonia Morozov, his mother's brother, is one of those 10. And he was taken away. So back to our discussion here. The Rebbe needed secretaries. The secretary's job was to be assigned different tasks to send people to fundraise, to establish schools, and to establish mikveh. It was a lot of work. So he had like 6 or 7 secretaries. One of them was actually a great scholar that loved study, and since young age, he could not live a day without studying Torah, So one day after the Rebbe appointed him, just within a week, I think, he came back to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I beg you, give me an hour a day to study, because all day they were overworked continuously. Give me an hour a day to study Torah. And the Rebbe got up and said to him, you know, since I became a Rebbe, this was an emergency time, the worst time for Jewish people. If you feel bad about the situation in Israel, in Russia those days, it was 10 times worse. People were being taken away. Pogroms. It was a very challenging time. So the Rebbe got up and said to him, as much as I want to give you, I want to give myself even more, an hour a day, because I love, he was a Rebbe. But in this day and age, we can't afford it. And the man realized that the Rebbe does not grant him his request, so he started crying. And the Rebbe turned to him, gave him a hug, and started crying with him, because the Rebbe felt the pain as well. So these are emergency times, so to say, saving people from the fire, making sure there is a mikveh so there can be a next generation of Jewish children, making sure there are rabbis who in hiding will marry off couples, making sure people are able to answer how to slaughter a chicken and make sure the chicken is kosher, etc. But other than that, communal affairs, I share it all the time and with my children, because I know the environment communal affair should never come on the account of personal connection to God. If I need to have a strong relationship with my spouse, with my children, with my parents, it should never come second to communal affair. So I tell always people, if my children need me, I will stop whatever I do, teaching Torah, praying, because that's what God wants me. That's what comes first. Then comes communal affair. So if someone is supposed to study Torah and pray, and they say, well, I have to cook for breakfast, because otherwise people will get hungry, we say to them, that's great. You can do it after prayer, because during prayer, you must be part of the community. That's a practical example. I'm sure it's not practical for us here, but it's a practical example.
Yeah.
That's a sheer that needs to be delivered to all of these communal organizations that throw their heart, their soul, and their wallets to the Jewish community and don't have a clue what you just said.
Unfortunately. The advice suggested by the Torah to protect oneself from being engulfed by the waters of the flood, both from those flood waters that originate in the awesome depths of the earth and from those that originate in the portals of the heaven, is to enter the ark. How do you protect yourself from the water from both sides? Enter the ark. What is the ark? The Baal Shem Tov interprets the word ark, teva. In the Torah, ark is the word teva, boela teva. Teva, which in Hebrew also means word, as referring to the tevos of the words of Torah study and prayer. The word teva in Hebrew has two meanings. One is ark, the other is word. Word of Torah is tevot atfilah. A person must enter the words of Torah study and prayer and be encompassed by them. He can then rest assured that he will not be inundated and swept away by the raging waters, that even under the direst of circumstances, Noah, the righteous man, and the members of his household will remain sound and intact. What the Rabbi is saying is, how does Noah is protected from the waters from above and below? Enter the teva. What is teva? Teva can also mean words. Enter the words of Torah and study and prayer. When you're busy with studying Torah and prayer and using the words to connect, then you are surrounded by protection from those two waters. Therefore, as the day begins, immediately upon awakening from sleep and prior to embarking on his daily mundane activities with their attendant raging water, he declares, I thankfully acknowledge you, modani lefanecha, for you have restored my soul within me. With these words, he recognizes that the vitality of his soul comes solely from God And only then afterwards he recites the morning blessings, thanking God for every particular expression of goodness that he has been granted. For example, he praises God who clothes the naked. On the surface, this blessing seems to be without purpose. What does he mean by blessing God who clothes the naked? After all, he owns clothing and seemingly is not in need of the divine assistance to dress. The same questions pertain to all the other morning blessings recited daily. Says Rabbi, after the same Modani, I thank you, God, for restoring my soul. You go, there is a list of, I believe, 20 blessings where you thank God. You thank God for shoes. You thank God for dressing me. What do you mean for thank God for dressing? My dressing is in the closet. It's right there. My shoes are right next to my bed. This question can be resolved based on our sage's statement, who is wise? One who sees what will come about, the future. The Alter Rebbe interprets that adage as meaning that a wise man is one who sees how all existence is brought into being each moment of from absolute nothingness, who realizes that at each and every moment, all existence is being created anew from godliness. The rabbi is explaining that you dress me, or you give me shoes, or you give me the ability to stand straight, because every moment God recreates the entire universe and everything. If God will not do it, the clothing that you have in your closet wouldn't be there. To cite a parallel, the Zohar teaches that Rabbi Yesa, the elder, would pray that God grant him his sustenance, even when his food of that day had already been prepared for him and was ready to be eaten. His wife would come, he would come home for breakfast, his wife would prepare eggs and lox, and they would have Russian sardines and herring, and it was being there, and you say, Hashem, please grant me the ability to have food. Help me find my food. And that's what Zohar brings. You can ask, what do you mean, give me the food, grant me food? The food is in front of you. Rav Yesa would not eat until he recited his prayers. Now, why would one pray to God for his sustenance when his food is already prepared for him? In resolution, there is the answer for that. In and of itself, every created entity is in essence absolute nothingness, just as it was before it came into being. The fact that it does exist is only because God, in his goodness, continuously renews its being, as we say in our prayers, who out of his goodness continuously renews every day the work of creation. We say it in the morning prayer every morning. For this reason, it is always relevant to pray for one's sustenance, even though his food is already on the table. The same holds true in regards to man's other needs, since food, clothing, and all other material needs are in essence nothingness. It is therefore necessary for a person to pray to God to renew their existence so that they have what he needs. That's why Rabbi Yesa would pray to God, please grant me my breakfast, even though the breakfast was already prepared, because the fact that it was prepared doesn't mean that he's going to enjoy it, because it can be gone, and God in his infinite kindness has granted him this ability. And that's the idea for coming to this is the rabbi goes on to explain that whenever you have those heavenly pockets of water that befall you and destroy your ability to concentrate and study Torah and pray, or from the depth of the earth, all the worries of medical conditions and neighbors and spouses and family and livelihood, what do you do to prevent them from washing you away? Enter the teva, go into prayer and study. What happens in prayer? You nullify yourself. Remember, we started with the idea with the water. The Alter Rebbe says that the waters of the flood were mikveh. The idea of mikveh is to totally nullify. You nullify today by prayer. When you pray to God, you realize everything is not to be taken for granted, but it's a gift from God at this moment. Even though you prepared and you saved in the bank, it means nothing because God made sure that you're around. Same is the words of Torah. Those words of Torah create bitul, create nullification. That nullification purifies oneself, connects them to God, and enables them to receive all the blessings. And that's the end of this week's Torah portion. Thank you so much.
Rabbi, one of the